Good morning to all ladies and gentlemen, honorable adjudicators, and esteemed opponents. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Zidan, and today I will be speaking on behalf of the opposition. As the leader of the opposition, I hereby would like to give out my stance and response to the Prime Minister to the motion of this House would require political candidates to pass a political competency test in order to run for office. So, to start it all off, the Prime Minister has identified a real problem, that is, our society declines trust in the local government, existence of political nihilism, and unqualified leadership. But this solution is one that will make democracy even weaker. The proposition that was previously stated by the Prime Minister, which is a standardized political competency test that's built on law, society, and economics in order to ensure that political candidates are qualified. But here's the critical flaw. Who defines what counts as qualified? Whose ideology, whose framework, and whose worldview gets to dictate the correct answers? When you reduce leadership potential to just mere scores on a test, you risk excluding candidates who have different mindsets, challenge concrete ideas, or come from non-academic backgrounds. Those are the very voices that democracy is meant to uplift. So, ladies and gentlemen, the government's proposition has assumed that technical knowledge alone makes a good leader, but historically, it's been the opposite. Some of the most influential political figures, including workers' rights activists, civil rights leaders, and indigenous politicians, for example, Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, has never come to power via elite institutions or have passed any political exams. Basically, such political competency tests cannot measure empathy, leadership under pressure, grassroots connection, and a lifetime of lived experiences. Those are the real competencies that qualify a leader, and they cannot be captured by a multiple choice format or a written exam. Passing a test proves a candidate is fit to lead is like saying someone who aced biology in high school can be a neurosurgeon, or a vet that specializes in curing an elephant. And by aced, I mean someone who has straight A's in such subjects or has high scores. Ladies and gentlemen, even with the best intentions, there is no neutral way to design such tests. The government claims that it ensures meritocracy, but what stops those in power from adjusting it to fit their ideology? It can lead to an aggressive political exam that's used to purge oppositions. Plus, the government assumes that testing will rebuild public trust. However, trust comes from the accountability of the politician itself, not tests of qualification. Politicians too need transparency and a good connection with the people. The government's proposal deepens the divide between the so-called qualified elite and regular citizens, creating a two-tiered democracy. So, the requirement for a political competency test in order for one to run for office is like turning democracy into an exclusive, unwelcoming community. Only those with the right privilege can get in, to make it simple. On the other hand, everybody else, no matter how passionate they are or how experienced, even grassroots connected, is left outside the gate. However, democracy is and was never supposed to be exclusive. Democracy is full of different voices. As the Pancasila states, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which means unity in diversity. Democracy is diverse, but united, and that is what makes democracy so powerful. So, ladies and gentlemen, what happens when a farmer, a civil rights activist, or a humble local leader wants to run for office, but fails a government-mandated test, even though they've been serving for their community for years? That means we risk excluding out all the leaders who are close to the people and relate to society, and it replaces them with test takers and bureaucrats. Ladies and gentlemen, the government says that the competency test is like a driver's license. It is meant to make people safe. But let's be clear here, comparing driving and running for office doesn't even make sense. Because driving is a technical skill, whereas politics is about values, judgment, and representing the people. If anything, the government's system of implementing this political competency test is like setting up a toll booth with an extremely high fee, only those who can afford education and political privilege gets to pass, leaving real leaders who are close with the people from everyday life to get left behind. Our mindset is that democracy is self-correcting. We acknowledge the existence of bad leaders, but the solution isn't to restrict democracy. The real solution is to strengthen it by promoting promoting civil education for the public, making politicians accountable through public debates and transparency, and the final solution, which is investing in political literacy. Because in democracy, the people are the test. We all know that public elections are messy, but at least they are free, and that freedom is what separates a republic from a regime or a dictatorship. Ladies and gentlemen, while the government's proposal may promise stability, in reality, they offer control by replacing political diversity with standardization. Basically, they offer structure at the cost of freedom. We, as the opposing team, believe the right to run for office must remain universal because we trust the people to define it. For those reasons, we proudly oppose the Prime Minister and the government's proposal. Thank you for your time.